Firefighters of Reddit, what's the dumbest person you had to save in a stupid situation? A motorist had a bad alternator and the car died while he was driving. The electric lock control stopped working. We were dispatched for a person trapped in a motor vehicle. On arrival, the advice was given to manually lift the lock knob. You can easily tell the ones who will not survive the first 24 hours of the zombie apocalypse. 2 bikini-clad girls had to be rescued from a swift-moving river in a canoe. Neither girl brought a life vest or a paddle. I was a volunteer firefighter many years back. One summer, after a long period of no rain, 2 good old boys decide to have a few dozen beers and take their Jeep into a nearby field to go off-roading. Well, 2 feet tall corn stalks that are bone dry wind up getting jammed up into the undercarriage, which, on a 90+ day, turns out to be hot enough to ignite a fire. The owner of the field sees the situation unfolding from their house and calls for fire and police. Given the proximity to my location, I go directly to the scene after hearing the page go out and see these 2 assholes trying to drive the Jeep faster and faster to put the fire out. Eventually, the engine gives out, but they won't leave the car. I physically had to reach in, burning my arms in the process, since I didn't respond to the station first to get my turnout gear, and pull them out. Somehow, they decided that remaining in the car would slow down the flames. And because they thought it was a good idea to continue driving a burning vehicle around a dry field, we now have a significant brush fire and have to call mutual aid from another county to help douse the fire. State police get involved. I have a nice trip to the hospital, and assholes lose their Jeep and the remainder of their booze. Former fire and rescue firefighter here. Have helped release several dogs and children stuck in the mechanism part of a recliner chair. Also a bird stuck in a tree. Go figure. My dad was witness to someone being stupid and rescued by a firefighter. I posted this to the Tales from Tech Support subreddit a while ago. Here's the copy paste. My dad worked for IBM's A/400, a mainframe system, tech support division for over 10 years, 1992 to 2003. A customer called in because he needed to run a report and send it out to the networked printer. For whatever reason, the report was failing to generate and the guy on the phone was freaking out because some corporate bigwig demanded that this report be printed and on his desk by 3 p.m. Just another day at work. About 10 minutes into the call, my dad starts to hear this strange high-pitched noise in the background. Dad, UHH, if you don't mind my asking, what's that noise at the background? Caller, oh, that's the fire alarm. Fire alarm? Yeah, the building is on fire. Far be it from me to tell you what to do, but shouldn't you get out of there? Dan, you don't understand. I have to get this report printed. Now are you going to help me or not? So they continue to troubleshoot the issue. A few minutes after that, my dad hears shouting in the background. Dad, there seems to be a lot of yelling in the background. Is everything okay? Caller, yeah, it's fine. It's just the firefighters evacuating the building. Shouldn't you get out of there too? Dan, I absolutely have to get this report printed. Are you going to help me? I'm not sure that I should. We pay our support contract. I have to get this printed and you have to help me. It's almost 3 p.m. It's just a report. I don't think it's worth risking your life. The caller starts to get furious when the shouting in the background gets much louder. A firefighter has come over to the guy on the phone and starts barking orders at him to get out of the building. The caller tells the firefighter, look, I have to print this report before 3 p.m. and I can't leave until it's printed. Over the phone, Dad hears the firefighter scream, I don't give a damn about your goddamned report. The building is on fire. Now move. There's a scuffling noise and the phone handset on the other end drops to the ground as the firefighter physically drags the caller away. After that, all Dad could hear was the sound of the fire alarm and various crackling noises. Needless to say, the report did not get printed by 3 p.m. It wasn't really his fault, but we had an old guy in a nursing home get his balls stuck in a shower chair. Dude picked up a metal ring from a hardware store in lieu of paying for an actual cock ring. It got stuck. He went to the hospital. The hospital called the fire department because a Dremel tool turned out to be the right tool for the job. Obligatory, not a fireman, but they were most definitely involved. I used to work in a Nick public grammar school over the summers to pay for college back in the 90s. One of the full-time employees was a nice guy but stupid. And I don't mean he was slow or anything. He just did dumb it because he was careless. One time he loaded up a trailer with like 25 gallons of gas and was driving it back through the main school parking lot. He didn't realize that container cracked open and spilled all 25 gallons in the parking lot. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he thought the best way to get rid of the evidence was to set the gas on fire. He didn't realize that burning gas gives off a lot of black smoke, and a gigantic cloud of black smoke coming from a school generally attracts a lot of attention from first responders. Panicking, he tries to put the flaming lake of gas out by driving over it with his car. The fire department gets there, screaming at him to stop driving his car through flaming gasoline. They finally get the fire out and just screamed at this guy for like 25 minutes. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. This is my dad's story, not mine. But I've heard it so many times I think I can accurately tell it here. My dad was on the Boston Fire Department for a little over 35 years. For 13 of those years, he worked at a fire station in Dorchester. In Dorchester, there is a zoo, the Franklin Park Zoo. One morning in late September, they get a call to the Franklin Park Zoo for a young girl mauled by a gorilla. This is the sort of call they'd get all the time. Gorilla jumps at the glass. Kid gets scared. Parents panic and call 911. So they hop in the truck and ride on over. It's one of those kind of foggy early fall mornings as they walk into the zoo. A couple of the other firefighters start walking into the zoo as my dad notices a man sitting on a bench holding a little girl in his arms. Assuming this is what the call is for, he walks over to the man. The little girl has a scrape on her forehead and she's crying but is otherwise fine. The man looks like he just saw a ghost. So my dad asks the guy what's going on. The man just says little Joe is out. My dad says what does that mean? The man just repeats little Joe is out. So my dad says who the duck is little Joe? Little Joe is a 500-pound adolescent male silverback gorilla, loose in the streets of Boston. It's right about now that my dad realizes that he's not exactly qualified to handle a gorilla, but he doesn't know who to call, so he calls everyone. 2 minutes later the fire chief shows up, not knowing what the call was about yet, and jumps out of his car saying, Mark, is this about a duck-eyed gorilla? My dad says yeah. But how'd you hear that? The chief says he's standing at the bus stop on Seaver Street. Now the SWAT team shows up, hats on backwards, M16s in hand, and my dad, being the smart as he is, looks at the sergeant and says, hey, I don't think this thing is armed. He caught a bit of flack for that later on. Animal control and the SWAT team worked together to take down little Joe. It took 14 tranquilizer darts before he finally went unconscious. Little Joe is still alive and well at the Franklin Park Zoo. And here's the picture of him at the bus stop for those of you who don't believe me. Had a drunk guy in Antarctica chase a penguin. Penguin stuck his beak through the offending drunk guy's calf. He got sent home, and a report on international treaty breach wound up on some Congress member's desk. Oh McMurdo, how I miss thee. Not me, but dad was a firefighter in Nick and once responded to a call at a Chinese food restaurant where the owner's walkway was iced over. He apparently didn't speak very good English and maybe misunderstood the job of a fireman. Genuinely don't know. They salted down his front walkway for him and explained that this was 100% not their job. They all had a good laugh and the guy gave them all free egg rolls. PPL always used to ask him questions about crazy calls and he never enjoyed talking about that, so he would always tell that story. Happened in 1999, still makes me laugh to this day 20 years later. Eater, if you plan on commenting something along the lines of 20 years ago, ZOMG, I'm old. Screw you for reminding me. I assure you roughly 40 other people have already beaten you to the punch. I get it. 99 doesn't feel that long ago. Let's all move on, lol. It's interesting that that's what so many people took away from this story. 2 I can recall. One specific. The specific one was a young girl around teenage years who decided those toddler swings with the seat you stick their legs through like a little basket so they can't fall out was made for a teenage girl. She got stuck and lost blood flow to her legs. We had to cut her down and get her to a hospital to have it safely removed due to it basically becoming a tourniquet on both her legs. the other is general, but it's people who didn't wear a seatbelt and the people they killed as a result. You have less control of a vehicle when you're not being held in place, so those wrecks are more common. As the first sign of trouble, your butt moves in the seat and reduces your ability to control the vehicle. You also become a projectile. If you're lucky, you only kill yourself. If you're not, you wind up bouncing around and killing a passenger. Also the leading cause of partial ejections and re-entry to vehicles, since nothing was holding them to the seats. So many times I could have just been there cutting someone out of a seat and them being barely beat up, but instead they had been scalped and died, or hit their kid or spouse or other family member or friend and killed them. One in particular I remember was a large man not wearing a seatbelt in an overturned truck. He woke up while we were working on him, cutting the passenger side up to get down to him as the vehicle was on its side, driver side down. He kept asking us how his son was. At first we didn't get it. Then we realized he was laying on his 15-16-year-old son, and due to the man's size we didn't see him. The son was wearing a seatbelt, but he died because his father smashed into him and smothered him to death while we worked, rather than just wear a seatbelt extender so his seatbelt fit. Also, don't lie to us about if you wore it. Your seatbelt won't fire the pretensioners if they are not engaged in the slot. They are designed that way. There is a circuit that is completed by the best being clicked in place, which is also how your car knows your passengers are wearing a seatbelt or not and sets off that obnoxious alarm. There is also a sensor in the passenger front seat of most modern vehicles to detect the weight of a small person, which is why your sodas or pizzas at whatever set off the alarm. Just wear the damn seatbelt and don't lie. If you were wearing it, I won't be able to pull tons of slack on it when I arrive. Guess what goes in the report as the determining factor your insurance sees as to if you should have your medical covered as a result of an accident? Yup, I don't know what they do with the information, but I have to write it in the report. Source: State Vehicle Rescue Technician and Firefighter. Mostly volunteer at this point. Years ago we had this call straight out of Caddyshack. Some guy had gotten tired of this gopher ruining his yard. Little did he know, though, he was facing the Sun Tzu of gophers. The homeowner, dwelling upon his experience from Vietnam, decided that the best way to deal with the gopher was to treat the situation like a VC tunnel. In lieu of a frag grenade, he poured a 5-gallon can of gasoline down the gopher hole, waited with a varmint gun, and lit it off. The ensuing explosion caused a small crater to form in his yard. I am still thoroughly impressed that there was a proper fuel-to-air ratio in the network of tunnels that allowed for such an explosion to happen. However, the gopher refused to surrender without a fight. The gopher ran out of the hole engulfed in flames, causing the guy's yard to catch on fire. The gopher sprinted into the guy's shed, still on fire, and burrowed into a void space in the wall, where he died. Like the martyr perk from Modern Warfare, his still flaming remains set the inside of the wall on fire, as well as several flammables. In the end, the guy's backyard was ruined and about a quarter of his shed burned down, taking out a bunch of power tools and a 0-turn mower. He definitely would have saved a few $1,000s if he had hired an exterminator. We needed to close the main connection through a forest over the winter because the trees were falling faster on the road than we could remove them due to way too much snow falling. Also, the redirection was more than an hour longer due to the snow. Some cars thought that they would come through but turned around as soon as they saw the trees on the road. One semi also thought he'd get through. He drove up to the trees and called the fire brigade and complained why we didn't remove the trees. As he was calling, a bunch of trees behind him also fell, locking him in. It stood there 1 month before the trees and the snow could get removed by us that at least the semi can back out. We needed another month until the road was free again. I remember asking a firefighter about this once, and he said a guy who was ducking a woman. Her husband came home, so he jumped out the second-story window buck naked and impaled himself through the upper leg on a fence paling. It was one of those fleur-de-lis ones, so it ducked up his leg pretty badly. They had to cut the paling out of the fence and load him into an ambulance. I'm not a firefighter, but I used to do a lot of disaster response work. Hurricane Floyd, Eastern NC. I had a farmer with a large family that refused to evacuate his house. Stubborn bastard. River had broke loose. Floodwaters were coming up fast, and the police had given up on changing his mind. I drove my truck right up into his yard, rolled down the window and asked him to dress his kids in something orange or bright yellow. He asked me why, and I said so body recovery will be able to distinguish them from all the dead pigs floating around. He told me to duck off, but 5 minutes later he had the whole family in the vehicle and they got the hell out. Dumbest tried to cross a raging river in 0-degree weather about a 300-foot span on a snowmobile. He lived but didn't make the crossing and the machine was recovered days later. Obligatory, not a firefighter, but recently in San Diego a group of suburban moms decided to take their infants up the local hiking spot called Cowles Mountain. It's not a particularly grueling hike as many children and elderly people can do it. However, there is a heat stroke warning posted at the trailhead. Not to mention it can get pretty hot here, and this last week was no exception with temperatures exceeding 90 degrees. Well, these idiots took their infants up in this heat. The trail is pretty exposed and due to its easy accessibility and Instagram worthiness, lots of inexperienced hikers flock to it. Many times with little to no water because they underestimated how hot and difficult it could be. Needless to say, the fire department EMS and chopper were all called as these moms had taken their babies up and were too tired and exhausted to come down. They had to go up and give water, check their conditions, and some even carried the babies down. I know fires are a lot hotter, but I bet they were cursing out these moms in their heads as they had to hike up the mountain in pretty much full gear. The moms came strolling down laughing and flipping off the cameras as they were angry people were going to see their stupidity. This happened all because they wanted to take a group photo with their infants on a mountain on a hot day. 2 kids and 2 infants. I was a Navy corpsman, so this one is probably a bit of a reach, but whatevs. Marine comes to sick call with a seriously beaten up D. Like lacerations, bruising. Thing was really ducked up. Asked him what he did and he insisted that what happened was that he had a surprise boner and it hit his zipped up pants zipper and basically went all garbage disposal on his junk. Dude would not drop this narrative no matter how many times we told him that this just doesn't happen. Finally, Doc, the actual MD, comes in and tells him enough of this it. Yada yada, write him up for malingering. Need the full story. Dude jammed his wiener into the back of a computer tower. According to him, there was an opening back there, probably because old PC towers in the Navy routinely had it swapped out and they didn't always cover openings when things were removed. So, because he was a ducking donkey, he stuck his finger in it and felt a light tingling sensation as his skin made contact with something electrical. So he took the next logical step and whipped out his D and shoved it into the back of this computer. What he did not account for was that the opening had sharp metal edges, but once inside, he got that tingling feeling and so he felt like he might as well finish the job before he pulled out. Plus, and this is where I had to stop myself from laughing, he felt it was smarter to pull himself out flaccid rather than hard. Taps forehead. This was not a young man. This was not a man without rank. Edit. I wear this gold and silver as badges of shame for the it I've seen. Not a firefighter. This happened to my son when he was 6. He was at a Cub Scout meeting which was next door to the fire station. The firefighters had these racks where they'd lay their hoses out to dry. I think the little scouts were climbing on those racks one day and my son's chubby leg slipped between the bars and got stuck. The firefighters had to come use the jaws of life on their own damn racks to free my kid. Firefighter paramedic in suburb of PHX had to transport a guy to the ER because he was constipated. His wife tried to dig it out with a wooden spoon. Spoon got stuck and hurt to move it. Walked in and there's a 250-pound man, butt naked, lying on his side with a huge wooden spoon stuck halfway up his butt. Former firefighter EMT. Easily the dumbest person I encountered was a mother of 4 who decided it would be an awesome idea to get a Facebook Instagram worthy picture of her kids, all under age 10, sitting in a rowboat. Mother untied it from the dock and thought she'd just pull them back with the rope that she forgot to hold on to. They floated a half-mile down the river before the 2 oldest boys managed to grab a branch hanging over the bank. It was really surreal to see 4 young kids, all in matching clothing, sitting in a boat waiting to be rescued. I have no clue what happened after, but they were physically fine, just scared. A little tired, but the mom was in full-blown panic mode and kept getting in our way. I hope she's making better choices now. Me and my dad are both firefighters and he said one time they went to a house because an elderly man could not get out of the leather recliner because he had been sitting in it for a week straight and his wife would just serve him drinks, food, and the guy never got up. He would just get drunk and defecate himself until he was physically stuck to the chair and they had to cut him out. I once had a firefighter tell me he almost died in a house fire while going back into the house to look for the owner. A neighbor was concerned about why the firefighter was still in the residence, so he asked another firefighter. This is about how the exchange went. Neighbor: why is that fireman still in the house? Firefighter: he's looking for the owner of the home. Neighbor: he is right over there with the video camera. Turns out the owner did not think it was important to alert the fire department he was out of the house. Instead, he was just taking video of the whole event. The fire started because the owner had tried to smother his barbecue cooker flame with leftover wood from the siding that had been installed on his home. The owner did not realize it would burned his whole house down. I was the dumb call. My cat got her paw stuck under the dishwasher and was screaming bloody murder. I couldn't move her paw and I couldn't lift the machine. So I sat with her while my husband called the fire department. She chewed right through one of my favorite blankets in her stress. Firefighters arrive, not in full suits but heavy boots and pants. Soon as they came around the corner to the kitchen, our cat miraculously was able to free her paw and take off to hide in the bathroom. The guys seemed confused, but at least it was easy. We thanked them profusely for being scary enough to free our cat, who had zero physical damage, not even a broken claw. I guess she'd hooked her claws on something and didn't want to let it go for love or money. Fire department and the paramedics had to come to my work one day because some kid didn't know the difference between a swimming pool and a splash pad. There's this artificial waterfall that goes down into a basin that's only about 2 inches deep where there's fountains and stuff for kids to play in. This kid decided to climb up the waterfall. There are multiple signs posted not to do this, and decided to dive off into the water below that again is only 2 inches deep. Luckily the kid landed flat on his face, so he survived and avoided being paralyzed, but he was knocked out cold immediately and would have probably drowned, but luckily his mother heard the splat and came running over screaming and pulled him out. Not a person and not me, but a really funny story. My dad was a firefighter in Los Angeles and was doing ember checks for a building fire that they just put out. A stray cat walks into the building like nothing happened. So my dad, being the joker he is, sees the cat and sees the news crews standing outside the building. So he quickly picks up the cat, throws a little soot on it, and runs out the building like he just saved it, in front of all of the world to see. We've done public service calls at my department. We once went out on a call to look for some lady's old dog that had wandered into the woods in the winter. We have this really cool device, tick or thermal imaging camera, that can detect even the slightest difference in heat, and we're able to follow the heat footprints of the dog to find her. We're stationed in a small town and don't really have much else to do in the winter. I was called to a home to get a pie out of the oven before it caught fire. The lady went to the store and was delayed for some reason. She called 911 to have the fire department take the pie out of the oven and place it on the stove. The call came in as something stuck in over and unable to turn off stove. Still number 1 call in 32 years. I'm no firefighter, but my sister called 911 because jalapeno juice was in her eye over the weekend. She described it as being waterboarded by the nicest guys on earth. Not a firefighter, but my uncle used to be one. He told me a story about a person he was training to become a firefighter. Said person didn't follow protocol regarding belts that they had to fasten around their bodies. When the person was performing a drill that involved getting suspended in air, a loose part of the belt caught his testicle as he was midair with all his weight crushing it. My uncle got him out of there and he had to go to the hospital. Heard this story from a friend. Emergency call comes in for a miscellaneous electrical hazard. Chief walks in and a woman tells him that the TV in the bedroom is making a weird noise. It's turned off but there's a low buzzing sound coming from the area. Chief unplugs the TV, which she didn't think to do, and the noise doesn't stop. The TV is sitting on top of a chest of drawers, so he opens up the top drawer and finds this woman's vibrator just buzzing away. Super awkward. I'm not a firefighter, but a YouTuber cemented his head into a microwave. They had to call firefighters to break the cement out, Get a call from a guy about cries for help coming from his neighbor's house. The neighbor called 911. We roll up lights and sirens and sure enough, there's a lady calling for help out the upstairs bedroom window. I'm paraphrasing here. There was a bit more back and forth, especially about the condition of her husband. Mom, we're with the fire department. Are you injured? No, it's my husband. He's unconscious. Please hurry. Is he breathing? Yes, I think so. Can you let us in? No, just break down the door. So we break down the front door and rush upstairs to the master bedroom, only be greeted by the woman. Naked, chained spread eagle to the bed with her husband out cold on the floor, wearing nothing but a Batman cape and mask. Evidently, during their kinky playtime, he had climbed up on a dresser and was going to jump onto the bed, but slipped in some lube and knocked himself out cold. She was secured tight to the bed and unable to free herself, and since this was mid-1980s, there was no way to ask Siri or Alexa to call for help. We loaded him up for a trip to the hospital and cut her loose so she could get dressed and join him. A fake. He made a full recovery. Obligatory, not a firefighter, but I was working with them that day. So back in my harbor master days, the town would have a 4th of July fireworks display every year. They would bring in a barge with something like 2,000 big ol' mortars on it. We, along with the Coast Guard, State Environmental Police and a few local cops with boats, would set up a stay back area around the barge for the show. Nothing serious ever happened, so we generally sat around with the best seats in the house. So we are all sitting there celebrating our independence by annihilating as much of the sky as the town budget would allow. About 2/3 RDS of the way, I notice a small fire on the front of the barge, so I give everyone a heads up on the radio. From a distance we see one of the crew run across this barge vomiting projectiles into the sky, with a fire extinguisher in hand. About the same time as he arrives, the fire flares up big time. The guy just throws the fire extinguisher into said fire and starts running back to where apparently they had a protected area. Before he makes it back, there is a massive flare-up explosion. Everybody hits their lights and starts hauling ass to get to the crew. That's when the remaining fireworks started going off. We were the second ones to arrive, and one of the assistant HMs is yelling at the crew to get off the barge. There are dozens of fireworks going off. You can feel an intense heat every single time. Balls of fire just flying every which way. The crew is refusing to leave. One guy is yelling at my co-worker that they can't because all of their belongings were on the front of the barge, where the fireworks were exploding in their tubes. The look on my guy's face was priceless. He just reaches up and starts pulling people down into his boat. I think by the time he grabbed the second guy, they all got the message and started jumping in. We all haul ass out of our sap. Somehow the only injuries were minor from them jumping into the boat. Though I did hear that one of the Coast Guard boats won itself a nice hole in the roof. I never actually saw it. We then make a call to the tugboat that brought the barge to turn its water cannon on the thing. We got a big negative from them on that one, as they weren't going anywhere near the thing. The next option was the volunteer fire department. The problem was that they didn't have a fireboat, just trucks. So the possibly inebriated firemen need to commandeer the local 3-car ferry and use that to get their truck to the barge. It took them about 30 minutes to get there and foam the thing down. It was a pretty funny sight watching them trundle on by, having a laugh about being on a ferry. We actually had to bring in the freaking bomb squad from the local large city, but they couldn't make it till the next day. When we finally got the report, the fire was caused by, you guessed it, all of the crew's belongings, which were apparently sitting next to the mortars and not with them behind the barrier. The kicker was all of the company's insurance and licenses etc were with their stuff, so they were all gone too. Just all round fun in small town America.